Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
In case you've forgotten, there are local elections in England on Thursday. Yesterday we were out campaigning with the Labour Party, and today Ellie Price has been to see how the Conservatives are getting on in Wandsworth in South London.
Do you want to come under the brolly, or are you okay with your hoods? Okay,
political campaigning has never been glamorous. Even less so on a soggy Monday morning in a council area your party has controlled for 4 decades.
It's a very good leaflet. It's very clear about what the pledges are.
You never can be too careful.
On Thursday. Very good news. Good luck with the weather. Thank you. It always feels much better after you've met the first resident. It's always better.
But even in areas a party might historically expect to easily win, is also the role of any visiting minister to dampen expectations.
Well, look, these are going to be tough elections. We're 8 years into the government. You know, that is always a tough election. People vote on a variety of issues, and you can't tell people what issues should be uppermost in their minds. But it is a local election, and people do really care about the quality of local services. Things like provision of homes locally is really important, and that's a campaign item here.
Did you start the store?
No, my father.
Wandsworth Council and its famously low council tax has been a Tory totem since Margaret Thatcher became the leader at the end of the 70s. But Labour, campaigning here last week, fancies its chances too.
Let's also make it a little bit of a referendum on this government.
The party took the Battersea parliamentary seat at last year's general election and hopes to build on a changing demographic with young professionals priced out of the housing market.
Oh, another one for 15.
It could be close, and the Tories insist they're not taking any votes for granted.
Working hard for every single one of them. We've got a strong message.
But it would be a disaster, a bit of a...
Look, let's wait to see what happens on Thursday. We are campaigning to form the result that we want to see, and it's right for the residents here, carrying on getting value, carrying on getting good services.
But that message may not be getting through to everyone. Now, this has been historically a Conservative-run council. Do you think they've done a decent job around here?
In a lot of ways, yes, but in other ways, no, particularly housing, very disappointing.
At the moment, I'm very happy with the way it's run. As I said, there's more national issues going on.
So can they rely on your vote?
Yes.
Do you think this council is well run at the moment?
No. It's been well run.
It has been well run.
I think so, yeah.
Most of the 1,300 or so seats the Tories are defending at these local elections are in the cities, not areas the party traditionally does that well in. It's about damage limitation, not sweeping victory. We'll get a clearer picture on Friday.
Much sunnier today, of course. That was Ellie Price out with the Conservatives ahead of local elections on Thursday. Now, let's return to Westminster, where, as we said earlier, the Cabinet has been meeting. Sajid Javid was there for the first time as Home Secretary, and his new job means he'll get to attend tomorrow's all-important Brexit subcommittee, where they're due to discuss the oh-so-tricky question of what kind of customs relationship we have with the EU after Brexit. Well, the Spectator editor Fraser Nelson is here to tell us what's going on there. But before we ask him, let's have a listen to Trade Secretary Liam Fox speaking earlier.
What is unacceptable is anything that keeps us in the customs union, either directly or indirectly. We voted to leave the European Union. That means being outside the customs union, because being inside either the customs union or a customs union post-Brexit would leave Britain with actually less ability to shape our future trade policy than we have today. The British public voted for more control, not less.
Liam Fox there. Fraser Nelson, we know what Liam Fox thinks. It hasn't changed. It's not a surprise that he doesn't want to be part of any sort of customs union. I don't know what he thought about the customs partnership idea that was put forward. But what does Sajid Javid actually think of the whole customs union debate, the new Home Secretary?
Sajid Javid is not a great fan of this. I mean, he was a Remainer in the referendum, but only a few weeks ago he said, look, Remainers, there's no point pretending this customs union is going to be a comfort blanket for us. This doesn't mean a half Brexit or something. It doesn't make much sense. And the funny thing about him is, even though he did back Remain, he's instinctively more Brexity. In some way, people really thought he was quite a hardline Brexiteer before the referendum. he only swapped sides because he was business secretary at the time, and a lot of people were telling him things that turned out not to be true. In other words, there's going to be lots more unemployment, we're going to go in a hiring freeze. But emotionally, he was far more in sympathy with the Brexiteers, and I think now he ought to be considered, probably quite an effective and consistent advocate for the sort of freedoms Liam Fox is talking about.
Right. Well, we certainly know that there are Brexiteers who are gleeful about the fact that they think the balance in Cabinet has now tipped back, or for the first time, in favour of their view of the world when it comes to the customs union. Do you think they're right to be so cheerful about it?
I think it's the balance might have shifted slightly. I mean, the problem is that lots of power still rests with Theresa May, who doesn't agree with a lot of her cabinet on the customs union. That's why 8 times they've been through to her asking her to change her mind. And it's not as if she's more... that tilting of the balance won't change that dynamic. But more importantly, we can see in the appointment of Sajid Javid, power in general hemorrhaging away from number 10. He is not her favourite person in that cabinet. She would have wanted, somebody a bit more who shares her worldview.
James Brokenshire or Karen Bradley,
yes,
maybe.
Exactly. But unfortunately for her, she's running out of cabinet members who share her worldview. And in Sajid Javid, she's got somebody with whom she's clashed repeatedly at cabinet, but his promotion shows that her general authority in the cabinet is waning.
On that, will we get a decision? Will we get any feel of direction tomorrow when they have this Brexit subcommittee ahead of Prime Minister's questions, or will again it be a question of fudge?
I suspect fudge. Every time we're supposed to have a make-or-break meeting, they always kind of find a way of delaying it or putting forward the big decision till next month when the weather is better, or some other excuse like that. And also, remember, it is negotiation. I mean, what the government wants is one thing, but what we can actually get from the other side might be another.
What about Amber Rudd on the back benches? I mean, a lot has been made that she was one of the lead Remainers, which is true. She made those comments recently. You may well have been there at that press gallery lunch with all those journalists where she suggested that actually there hadn't been an agreed position on the oh-so-important customs union. How much danger will she pose?
Well, it depends what she wants to do. I mean, Anna Soubry has already been giving her this open-armed welcome to the trouble club at the naughty corner of the Commons, and she would love to have in Amber Rudd one of the most eloquent voices for Remain backing the Tory rebels. I don't think Amber Rudd will go down that road. I think she does think that, yes, I'll get back into cabinet, and I'm not going to get there by making myself a professional nuisance.
Yes, how long do you think it'll take for her to get back into cabinet? Yesterday, James Cleverly was saying, oh yes, we want her back very soon.
Normally, I don't know, how long has the sin been nowadays? About 18 months? But, it depends if the Tories are going to be in power in 18 months.
All right. Well, you're not in the sin bin, Fraser. Not yet, anyway. Thank you for coming in. Now, imagine you work for a political party and you've got elections coming up. Do you tell any journalists who ask that A, you're going to do far better than everyone expects, B, that you're going to do much, much worse than that, or C, the truth? Have a look at this.
Well, I'm quietly optimistic that we are turning the corner. I mean, we've done well in real elections over the last 6 months or so.
Well, this is the one in the cycle that's always one of the challenging set of elections. There's a lot of seats up around the country.
I think we're going to make ground in London. I'm hopeful we can make a gain in Manchester. We will come out with net gains, I think, at the end of the council elections when the counting's done.
We're predicting that because these were high watermark years when the seats were last fought in 2014, that it's probably going to be difficult to get anything like as close.
You're downplaying expectations, Andrew Gwynn.
No. Well, time will tell whether those politicians were answering A, B or C as I read them out, but they were probably all engaging in what's known as expectation management. You might not have heard of it, but my guests here in the studio have. Giles Kenningham, he used to work for the Conservatives, and Ayesha Hazarika, she used to work for the Labour Party. Think of them as recovering spin doctors. That's why you look so well, the two of you. Life is obviously so much better.
Life is good, yeah.
So tell me, what goes on when you're sitting there in the war room, gaming the next election? Do you go out there and go for A, B or C?
I think actually for the Tories this time it's about how do you play Lib Dems and UKIP into the equation. So UKIP could face total wipeout during these elections, and Lib Dems doesn't really seem like they're going to have that revival despite being a pro-Brexit, pro-Remain party in London. So that's where you want to shift it. But yeah, look, it does go on, and I think also what's crucial this time is what happens on the night. How do you set the tests for the opposition? what the questions on social media, and also what happens the next day. So it's almost about who doesn't say something as opposed to who does say something. The Tories will need to move the conversation on quite quickly, I think.
Right, so how does it work, expectation management?
Well, there's normally a big row about it behind the scenes. And all the special advisors get together, and then the small group of politicians who are tasked to sort of be the key political, you know, the Andrew Gwynns or whoever, the James Cleverleys, who will be out on the night doing all the media rounds. And there's almost quite a tussle between the head of communications and the head of communications normally wants to, you know, go out and do quite low expectation sort of management. And there's often, I remember one a local elections thing, when we had sort of agreed not to give any figures out, and then a senior politician went out and briefed numbers. And that's fatal. You don't want to pin yourself to numbers.
Right.
So take the Labour Party in this election. They should have a stunning night on Thursday. They're set to do very, very well, particularly in London. So they're almost trying to do quite a necessary sort of playing down expectations. And Giles is correct when he says the test is often set by the opposition parties. So, for example, in London, Wandsworth and Westminster are being seen as the key measures of success or failure on either side.
And on that basis...
historical context, basically.
Right.
So, yeah.
But on that basis of Wandsworth and Westminster, I mean, is it going to be the case, if you were doing the narrative now, would you be saying, if we hold on to Wandsworth and Westminster, it's been a fabulous night for the Conservatives?
That's what is sort of being said, really.
Yeah, a bit. I think you've got to look at the overall context. What would propel Labour into power? And you use comparative narratives here. Also, look at the backdrop here. Incumbent governments don't do well, generally. You know, we've got a backdrop of cuts, we've got a backdrop of austerity. That's where you want to be spinning it in terms of taking a narrative.
But the interesting thing is, local elections are very rarely the things that determine what happens at the next general election.
Well, especially if it's a long way off.
Take last time, so 2014, Labour had a stunning night. We gained 300 seats, we gained 3 councils, and actually that helped feed the narrative that probably Ed Miliband was going to be on course for Downing Street, and we all know that sort of didn't quite work out the way that everybody had planned. So I think you have to take this with a healthy pinch of salt, or a salt mountain, really, in terms of the narrative about what this kind of means for the general election.
But I think ultimately they do matter in terms of getting boots on the ground, getting activists there who can create those community networks which do propel MPs back into power.
Right. I mean, how much of a risk is it when people, or if people think it's all done, it's all in the bag?
It's a huge risk. You've always got to elevate the risk of the opposition getting in, because otherwise people don't go out to vote. Yeah, it's a huge thing. Have
you got any examples of where your narrative worked, where you thought about it, you'd rowed about it, you finally agreed on something and it worked?
I mean, mine would be the general election 2015, where the whole SNP Labour narrative took over, dominated the airwaves. If we hadn't elevated the risk of Miliband getting in, there'd have been more focus on our policies, and you see the different election.
That was very damaging. It was very damaging. And actually, the one phrase that everybody remembers that David Cameron said so powerfully was, under Ed Miliband, there will be chaos. And of course, we now look at what's happening in the country and think, oh, the irony. So, I mean, I remember from the Labour point of view, one of the things that... Because, of course, you have these calls that go on through the night as well, when various staging posts. But I remember one set of elections where we thought we would hold the seat in Bradford, and George Galloway won it, and that was literally like a bolt out of the
And I remember having
blue
that conversation with my old boss, Eric Pickles. We were like, the problem for Labour is they didn't see it coming. It wasn't the fact they'd lost. And that comes down to these elections matter of having boots on the ground.
Right. Well, do you shudder listening to all of this, or does it fill your heart with joy ahead of Thursday?
It's funny, isn't it? Because I'm a new MP, so you think it's not going to be like the thick of it, but then conversations like this, I think it might be.
Is it like the thick of it? Is it like the thick of it?
It's always like the thick of it, on steroids.
I'm learning. I mean, I think the thing for me that is really important is also expectation management of the membership. So the Lib Dems have doubled the membership that we had 2 years ago. It's their first big set of elections post the general. A lot of them, it's the first time they've gone door knocking. So yeah, we need to also manage the expectations.
What do you perceive as success on our
for us? I mean, we should make gains, but whether or not it's going to be, I don't even know myself. I'm hoping locally that we'll make a couple of gains.
But you're doing my job for me. That's great. Come on, give us the numbers.
I don't have them.
Yes, but can you see the dangers of giving predictions?
Absolutely right. And actually, I'm a pessimist when it comes to campaigning. Even in my own win, I did not believe it until they said it. Until you have the votes in the bag everything is to play for. You haven't won until you've actually won.
But the Lib Dems are going to be interesting on the evening because, you know, it will be interesting to see whether...
It's a rare thing from a Labour spin doctor.
The Brexit vote, you know, whether the kind of anti-Brexit narrative is cutting through, and also where the UKIP voters are going to go. Because although we've seen the collapse of UKIP, there's still a lot of people that hold UKIP views. And are they going to go to the Conservatives? And are they going to go, or are they going to go come to
You think that's where the story is?
Well, I think obviously the media are going to try and frame it as a two-horse narrative, but you could see UKIP annihilation and a fate of the Lib Dems to bounce back.
Well, then it would be a two. Then it would be a two.
But also in the sense, if Vince Cable does not come back in London, he's got to be toast. He's got to go because you're in the most pro-Remain part of the country.
No one's thinking that, actually. No. In the current climate against Labour, with the massive campaigning power of momentum, actually, we're managing our own expectations about we should gain some seats for sure, but I don't think we're necessarily expecting to gain councils
for you guys.
or whatever.
I think the problem is, I think the issue is that Labour is so strong in London. I mean, there's no doubt. You know, every political analyst will kind of say that the Labour vote is going to be. I mean, there are some areas where the entire council could be completely.
There is a
Labour.
wild
Every
card.
single council seat could go Labour.
Well, that's a risk for the Conservatives, isn't it? If there's wipeout for the Conservatives.
Yeah, I think if they lose all of them, obviously you've got Wandsworth, you've got Barnet, you've got Kensington. If they lose all of them, it's not great. I think the challenge for the Conservatives is how do you move the conversation on afterwards?
And there is
do you let this be hung around your neck like a noose?
Right. I mean, you talked about Aisha talked about Labour being very strong in London, and you said there've got to be some gains. Do you accept it could be very hard in London?
I think it's going to be very hard everywhere. We've got a very polarised politics right now, which actually makes the centre ground a really difficult place to be, because as soon as you say, if you vote Labour, you're going to get the extreme of the Tories or vice versa, it actually makes the centre ground very difficult.
Right.
But there is a wild card here, which is EU voters. And this is potentially the last election that EU voters can vote in. And actually, that's where we're focusing.
Well, that's where you're pinning your hopes, isn't it? We're going to talk about this in a minute, so let's not steal the thunder of the next or whenever it is discussion we're going to have. Journalists, persuading them, they know what you're up to. We all know what you're trying to do in terms of telling us what the narrative is. So is it very difficult to persuade cynical journos?
Oh, absolutely. You know, I pity the Labour press office right now who will be having to ring people saying, you know what, we might not have that good a night in London. It might not be that good. And everybody's like, come on. And I noticed actually Andrew Gwynn at the weekend was sort of trying to downplay some of the expectations.
And it looks so obvious.
I think the only way you can do it is historical context and third parties. There was a YouGov poll out last week which said Labour were going to get 50% in London. I do think for Labour, if you're going to want to be the party of government, you've got to really take this election by storm.
Right.
It'll be huge gains.
Well, Giles and Aisha, we have to end it there, but you can sit back and watch, can't you?
Well, I'll be commentating on it.
Oh, all right then. You'll be contributing. Thank you very much for coming in. Now, let's return now to Thursday's local elections. I'm not sure we ever left them in England, and the fortunes of the Liberal Democrats. A diminished force since the days of the coalition. They're now hoping to rebuild their base in local government. Our reporter Greg Dawson has been out with Lib Dem leader Vince Cable in the borough of Richmond.
Let's face it just wouldn't be an election without the spring sunshine and the Lib Dems boasting about winning here. But in recent years, winning has hardly become a habit for the Liberal Democrats. But here in south-west London, they do have a history of success. On May the 3rd, they'll be hoping to win back control in nearby Kingston. And here in Richmond, the goal is to at least repair some of the damage done in 2010 and 2014, when they lost the majority of wards to the Conservatives. Enter the man with backpack, bicycle and bundles of leaflets. But also a healthy dose of realism about what his party can achieve.
It's quite a tough election in many ways because we're defending some boroughs where we have very large Lib Dem majorities, good councils, and Eastleigh and Sutton and South Lakeland. So, you know, defending is hard. But, I'm expecting that we will make progress in terms of seats. Not spectacularly, but I'm hoping we'll make progress, and perhaps one or two councils as well.
The pitch to voters on the doorstep is that his party offers good local representation, will oppose further cuts in public expenditure, and of course, their preference to keep Britain inside the EU. After Brexit, the Lib Dems sensed an opportunity for that much vaunted fight back. They were the only mainstream party promising people a final say on the Brexit deal. But it didn't work in 2017. Here it is again, the same promise on their 2018 literature. Will it work this year?
In my view, the Brexit deal, the question's been put out there and the answer's been given, and that to me is job done. They shouldn't start delaying and hankering over what's already been decided upon.
I agree with them in principle, but I don't know practically whether that's going to work, whether it's an unassailable move towards the Brexit and actually they'd be better off, putting their energies in other places. Really hard to tell.
But this election comes at a time of speculation in Westminster about a new centrist party to snap up pro-EU voters who feel abandoned both by the Tories and Labour.
There you are, more or less in the middle. Why do you think you're struggling to convert that into votes?
Well, I think we are there to meet that expectation, and I think we will. We've had 2 difficult elections. Turning that round isn't straightforward, but it is already happening. As I say, we're making gains locally in local elections. Membership is soaring, but it won't happen in an overnight spectacular way.
In the past, the Lib Dems were always quick to credit any success in Westminster to their strong foundations in local government. If that elusive fight back is to finally get going, then rebuilding a durable base in these elections will be crucial.
Greg Dawson out on the campaign trail there with the leader, Vince Cable. You're a new MP, relatively speaking. How much of a shadow does the legacy of being in government with the Conservatives cast over your party?
Well, certainly, I think we'd be stupid to say it doesn't at all. But I think it is also less and less. And I see this on the doorstep. So we're fighting in Oxford and in Cherwell District. And during coalition, when I was the candidate rather than the MP, it was coming up regularly. And now it just isn't. But I think when you say diminished force, we are certainly diminished in Westminster, and we're hoping at some point to rectify that. And I think the start is the local elections. It's going to be important for us on 2 fronts. We hope to make gains. Vince is managing expectations, I think, well on that. It's very urban-facing, it's very Labour-facing. Labour's doing incredibly well at the moment, so it's just very difficult to tell. But it's also our membership, and it's about training up our, we've got 50,000 new members since the referendum, none of whom really have much experience in campaigning. There's a lot there that we've got to work with.
But your area, Oxford has always been quite fertile ground for the Liberal Democrats and also a bit for the Greens, as, historically, obviously, the Conservatives and Labour did well. But being in government massively damaged you electorally in the subsequent elections. How do you credibly paint yourself as a real alternative to the Conservatives when you were in government with them?
Yeah, well, I think we're beginning to see it with things like Windrush. So we're now able to say the sorts of things that we blocked, the kinds of things that
But do people believe you because you were in government with them?
I wasn't.
I
disagreed with a lot of actually what was going on in there. But I think it was very telling that as soon as we weren't in coalition, they then brought other bills that then were able to do what they were able to do. I think moving on from that, though, and I think by and large the electorate has moved on. And I think we need to move on as a party, as a new MP and as education spokesperson. I think it's incumbent on us to give people new reasons to vote for us. And at local elections, actually, we have many good reasons. We've got very assiduous councils and councillors where we hold them. And in the places we're hoping to gain, what you get in a Lib Dem councillor is someone who works really hard and is your voice in those councils. In Oxford, for example, 75% of Oxford is Labour. We need a decent opposition in Oxford in order to make the case for what local people want. So that's the sorts of things that we're saying on the doorstep.
You talked in the earlier discussion, to some extent, pinning your hopes on those EU nationals who are able to vote in this election in a way that they couldn't in the general election. Is that just putting all your eggs in one basket and sort of crossing your fingers?
Yeah, not at all. I think it's a wild card, and I chose that word correctly, I think, because we just don't know what they're going to do. And a lot of them have never voted before. So I've had a lot of conversations with them about how do you do it in this country, because it's slightly different from theirs. But actually, no. The bread and butter of it is what are we going to do locally for you? And that will be different in different areas. What are the track records of the councils that we're fighting? And they have all got their stories to tell. And where we're defending it, it's where our track record is strong, and that's what we're going to be pushing.
Right. Do you accept, though, that the anti-Brexit stance has not delivered votes for you? Not in bigger numbers?
That said, I credit partly why I won my seat in Oxford, Western Abingdon. It really just depends on which part of the country. And I know that locally people will be tailoring their messages accordingly. So where there are areas that voted strongly to remain, it'll be mentioned. And more than that, we are the only party that's offering a people's vote on that final deal. 26% only of the electorate apparently know that about us. So we're hoping that in those areas that will play. But in other parts of the country, actually, we're not really talking about it because it doesn't really matter for them.
Right, because lots of people don't want a second referendum, do they? It is quite a divisive Marmite issue, isn't it?
It depends, yeah.
All right. Now, we've been talking about local elections, as you would expect, and what election would be complete without a Liberal Democrat like my guest of the day, Layla Moran, putting a leaflet through your door. And the chances are it might have a bar chart on it to show how well the party did last time. But have the Lib Dems just occasionally been taking liberties with the numbers? Well, who better to tell us about the numbers than the man who did so much to popularise maths? Can help me too. It's Johnny Ball. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Delighted to have you in here. So, yes, let's do the numbers, and I'm relying on you to help me here. Let's show the first bar chart here that appeared on a leaflet. Now, you can see there 3 bar charts: Labour, Liberals and Conservatives. Numbers of votes, and this was the general election in 2005. It was taken from that election.
Labour must be about 10,000, 10,200.
All right, well, OK, you're saying about 10,000. Let's put your numbers on. Looking at that bar chart, you would say Labour would be on 10.5, and you put the Conservatives on 1,800. That's about right?
I think that's about right.
That's right. Well, let's have a look. Layla, do you agree with what Johnny's figures are?
As it stands, but I should point out there are no axes.
Right, well, OK, but just as it stands, looking at it, would you say that's a fairly accurate description? Let's have a look what the Lib Dems actually put on the leaflet there. Right, so quite a bit higher for Labour, 16,118, and the Conservatives on 3,740. What would you say about those figures? Are they a fair representation, Johnny?
I think that, well, as you say, it depends where the base is, and you can't really tell. But if we assume the base is where the base is there, they're a bit in error, I think the word is.
Do you think the Liberal Democrats who did that might not have got their maths GCSE?
Well, yes, but they may think their voters haven't done the maths GCSE ever anyway, so it doesn't matter. So it could be that.
Well, let's have a look at the next one. So, bar charts number 2. So, number of MPs, and this was in Scotland, in an election there, and this is the number that the Liberal Democrats gave for themselves, 12. Labour blank, SNP blank, Conservatives. So, Johnny, let's have a look at your numbers, looking at those bar charts.
Yeah.
Take us through them.
Labour, about 14. SNP just below half, so 5, and Conservatives 1. Yeah. So Labour 14, I think.
Yeah, Labour, do you agree?
Yeah, this is clearly wrong. No, I can't work out what
this
they're trying to do.
This isn't, is it? You think this is right? Let's have a look at the Lib Dem numbers.
Oops.
Oh, well, so Labour, with that bar chart, have got 39.
Yeah.
Do you think that is even close to what that bar chart says?
I should point out, I used to be a maths teacher, and this drives me up the wall as well. I should say that in my constituency, we measure each one with a ruler. Well, actually, it's on the computer now. But I think there is a point in this. These are meant to be indicative. I don't think that's good enough, though. So there you go.
Right. Does that undermine trust, do you think, in politics and the numbers?
It does. I think, what do they say about elections? You know, you can't fool all the people all the time, but if you do on a Thursday, it lasts 4 years. You see, so that's the point. And I think slight manipulation to get people to think, oh, they do need my vote, or perhaps, you know, for the people who they need to vote.
Well, that's what it's about, isn't it? It's to try and make out it's a different kind of race to the race it really is on those figures or with those bar charts. Right, we've got a final bar chart to show you. This is number of council seats. So again, 3 bar charts there. Liberal Democrats on 25. What did you put, Johnny, for the Conservatives and Labour?
I said about, I don't know, 21, 22? Yes, 22. About 9. Yeah.
Right, maths teacher, Layla? Yeah, you'd sign up to that? OK, well, let's have a look at what the Liberal Democrats actually put on that leaflet. Right, well,
Why would you do that?
Right, well, why would you do that, Layla? I didn't.
Why are you worried?
No, honestly, and I think there is a serious point to be made here about the use of mathematics generally. I think we should be using more axes, personally. So,
is it just about
make it clear?
I think that's true. The only thing is, I've written this book, which is a history of mathematics. The one thing it doesn't really have in it is statistics. I think statistics are boring, and anybody can warp them any way they like, and something else comes out. So I don't trust them anyway. So statistics is the most boring part of maths.
But can I also point out, other parties do this. So you guys have been a little
Never.
Unfair.
Do they
Other
really?
parties do this too.
Really?
I'm not saying it's right that everyone does it. I think no one should do it.
Right. Do you think then it's unfair to say that you're famous for it?
Oh, are we?
Well, you might be. I mean,
tell me.
Would you vote for the Lib Dems on the basis of seeing me advise them anyway?
I pass on that.
You pass on that. Well, quite right. That was a trick question. Do you think they could be useful, though, using maths in this way?
Yes, you've got to egg people on. I mean, all the door knocking and everything is really, come on, let's get you out there, you know. Let's hope we can get all the old age pensions out during the day, and then you hope it rains at 5 o'clock so the workers go straight home. Well, and it's that kind of thing that you do.
Well, on that basis, you might need some advice, I think, from Johnny Ball. That's it. That's all we have time for.
Now, all the parties face an awkward test in Thursday's English local council elections. For Theresa May, it could be a test of how much damage the Windrush scandal has inflicted on the Conservatives. And could Labour's own row over anti-Semitism hold it back in some areas? Then the Lib Dems and UKIP, are they struggling to find a clear position in the political landscape? Across England, 4,400 councillors will be elected on 150 councils. There are no polls in Scotland, Wales or Northern Ireland. All council seats across London are up for grabs, with Labour targeting several traditional Conservative strongholds. Labour is defending its own heartlands in Manchester and Liverpool. There'll be sharper battles in Swindon and Tamworth, narrowly held by the Conservatives, and Stockport and Dudley, where no party currently has overall control. From Dudley, our political correspondent Michael Crick reports.
From the ruins of the old Norman castle to the juveniles of the local zoo, they love a good scrap round here. And you won't get many fights tighter this Thursday than Dudley. Labour were out this lunchtime working to seize back the control they lost here only last year.
The Conservatives say that when you ran the council up until a year ago, Labour just had politically motivated cuts. Adult social care, school crossing patrols. Can you guarantee if you get back there won't be any such political cuts?
I can absolutely guarantee you what we will do. We will be going straight to 10 Downing Street and reminding them of the £90 million of cuts. I repeat that, £90 million worth of cuts that this Tory government have put upon Dudley Council.
It's important to make sure our local area is welcoming. We've got a lovely...
Who turned up? A young Lib Dem whose party's so keen to win their first seat here in 8 years, they've struck a pact with the local Greens.
Together with the Greens, we've decided we split the borough, so we've got 12 candidates each in 24 wards, so that everybody gets to vote for a progressive option.
Now our next area which we'll be entering into is called Sherdswell Basin.
Industrially, this is the Black Country, once known for its canals, iron and coal, and politically long a gritty battleground.
The Conservatives took charge of Dudley Council last summer, but they've depended since then on the backing of a handful of UKIP councillors. But with the decline of UKIP nationally, both the Conservatives and Labour are hoping in these elections for rich pickings from what they both see as UKIP's corpse.
Hoping that plenty of people come. We've advertised it massively. And
MEP Bill Etheridge is one of 7 UKIP councillors who hold the balance in Dudley. He doesn't think the Windrush fiasco will cause a backlash against parties who've been tough on immigration.
what matters here is the mismanagement of the local council and the disillusionment with the main parties, which is rife.
You say mismanagement of the council, you're helping manage it.
Well, we're trying to get some sanity into it, but there's only 7 of us at the moment. Hopefully after Thursday we've got 19 candidates up, we can get a few more in, bring some common sense to the place.
So what did they think about Windrush on Dudley Market? And do you think that will make any difference to how people vote in the elections?
Yes, I do.
Will it make a difference to how you vote?
No, I don't think so, but I think it will make a difference.
Do you think the Windrush story will make a difference to how the elections go on Thursday?
To be honest, I don't think nothing will. No. I
don't think it will?
No, I don't think it will, because people are just going to carry on doing what they do anyway.
And they've got a new Home Secretary, Sajid Javid, who's an MP from not far away.
I know, yeah.
He's the first Muslim
yeah,
Home
that's right,
Secretary.
yeah. Mind you, he seems very good, doesn't he? Absolutely disgusting the way they've worked, just like you and me all our lives, and then they want to ship them back off.
This week, Dudley Conservatives ditched one of their candidates for this leaflet saying all Labour had delivered in one ward was hepatitis and decline. But the Tories say they've run the council better than Labour. After the Windrush fiasco of the last 2 or 3 weeks, why should anybody vote Conservative?
They should vote Conservative, particularly in Dudley, because we have changed the way this council is run.
We are not cutting frontline services, not one penny reduced from children's or adult social care.
And you can guarantee that won't happen in future?
You can never guarantee it won't happen in years to come, but on our watch, we are deliberately looking to make savings on the back office, on issues like procurement and commercialisation, where we believe there are millions of pounds to be saved.
It won't just be meerkats watching carefully this Thursday. In Dudley and nationwide, this is all parties' first big test since the general election.
Michael Crick in Dudley.